so when people call the landline, it goes to that box and it sends it to my cell phone. $8 a month for that. Trying to keep them. When I moved my office to Rapid, I wanted to keep my Spearfish phone number, and that was the way I could do it. Wireless.
We welcome everybody to the City Planning Commission for October 27th, 2016. If any member of the audience would wish to speak to an item, please fill out a speaker request form, and they are on my right, the back there, and fill that out and give it to one of the staff people, and we will make sure that you get to speak to that item when we get to it. And if anybody has a cell phone in the audience, we request that you please turn it off or put it to mute. And if you do have to take a phone call, please step outside so we don't disrupt the meeting. Okay, items 1 through 9 have been placed on the consent calendar and may be approved as a group. Action will be taken on all consent items in accordance with staff's recommendation by a single vote. Any item may be removed from the consent calendar by any planning commission, staff member, or audience members for separate consideration at this time. The findings of the Planning Commission are recommendations to the City Council. The City Council will make the final decision with the exception of the following items. Item 7, which is 16 PD 047, and item 9, which is 16 UR 021. The Rapid City Planning Commission's items on these items are final unless any party appeals that decision to the Rapid City Council. All appeals must be submitted in writing to the Community Planning and Development Services Department by the close of business on the 7th full calendar day following action by this Planning Commission. Are there any items 1 through 9 that staff would like to have removed?
Items 4 and 6, please.
Okay. Are there any items that the Planning Commission would like to have removed? Okay. Are there any items 1 through 9 that any audience members would like to have removed for separate consideration?
Move to approve with the exception of item number 4 and 6.
Second.
Okay, motion has been made by Steve and seconded by Linda to approve all except items 4 and 6. All those in favor of that motion say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion passes. So we will now go to item 4.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Item 4 is a preliminary subdivision plan to create a 6.5-acre lot that would be located east of Luna Avenue. This is just south of the Pizza Ranch out by Rushmore Crossing. It's currently zoned general commercial. The property is currently void of any construction. You can see that there is an access road that was constructed within Rushmore Crossing to serve the backside of those commercial buildings, and that's the route that the delivery trucks take as they're bringing in their merchandise. In addition, we have Luna Avenue along this west lot line. Staff recommended that this item be brought forward with standard stipulations, improve Luna Avenue and the access easement to city street design standards or get an exception. Because that access easement is completely on the adjacent property and it was intended to primarily serve as an access route to the backside of those buildings, we thought the trade-off would be that if the applicant placed a non-access easement along that north lot line, that access would then not be taken to this property, and it wouldn't make sense to visit any improvements along that easement that would be street or water considered as a part of this plat. The owner of the property is in the audience today, and he mentioned this morning that he would like to speak to that. The exception request will come in separately and will be reviewed by Public Works staff as to whether or not it's appropriate to require improvements within the easement. But Mr. Shaffey would like to speak to the requirement of placing a non-access easement along that north lot line. Our recommendation is to approve with the steps you see in the report, and stipulation number 1 does include providing a non-access easement along that north lot line. And with that, Madam Chair, if it's okay with you, I'd like to allow Hanny to speak to the item.
You bet. Thank you. Hanny?
Do you want this one? Okay.
Sure. Good morning, Madam Chair and members of the Commission. My name is Hanny Shafi, and representing the owners. And On the non-access easement, currently there exists access easement and utility easement close to on the south side of Sam's Club. And as Vicki mentioned, it does provide delivery route for the businesses, and it provides customer access to the Sam's Club. Putting non-access easement on the access easement is not really allowed anywhere in the city code and the city ordinance. Typically, the city puts in non-access easements on existing public right-of-way because the access easements are there for the access of the properties, and they are not city streets. The property that is being platted may or may never have access to that access easement. But if it does, it is in a zoning that allows the city to review it at the time the site plan comes in, because it is zoned general commercial with a PCD. Since that is a delivery route, this property that is being platted may utilize that same access easement for also a delivery route. So since the city ordinance does not really give the city the authority to put in or replace non-access easements on access easements, but the city is able to do so on public right-of-way, I really don't believe that we should complicate the future development of that property by placing a non-access easement on the access easement that is on its side. Thank you. I hope that answers the question.
Thank you. Does staff have any comments after Hanny has made that comment?
I'd like to hear from the city.
Yeah.
Thank you. Just wanted to clarify that portions of the property are in a planned development, and it would be anticipated that any future use you would see as a part of a final plan development. I'm not sure how the access and utility easement that was secured as a part of Rushmore Crossing, what rights it would give the adjacent property owner anyway, and that's probably a discussion the property owners would have to have between themselves as to whether or not who could use that access easement. But for our purposes and visiting with Public Works staff, there was some consideration of whether or not it would be appropriate to extend water within this area and also to improve the access easement to city street design standards. Obviously, it's paved, but there's no curb, gutters, sidewalk, et cetera. And would it make sense to treat this as a full commercial street or just an access easement within Rushmore Crossing? So in visiting with Ted before the meeting, he is requesting that the stipulation stand as is. And what Hanny's asking is that you guys remove that portion of stipulation number 1 that would require the non-access easement. And I apologize, but we're going to place that on you folks for discussion.
Okay, thank you. Any comments from the Planning Commission members?
Yes.
Okay, Steve.
Well, 2 questions. One is, could you explain the purpose of the non-access easement? And then I'd like you to address Hanny's comment about whether you have the authority to do that. I mean, I'm kind of wondering the difference between access and non-access easement. What's the purpose of it? Why do you want to put that there? And then again, to Hanny's question.
I'll probably let Ted speak to the infrastructure design criteria manual as to where it allows a non-access easement. And Steve, your first question again was?
You talking about non-access versus access on that road. Could you explain those to me?
Yeah. So typically when we require a non-access easement, it is so that a prospective buyer or someone laying out the design of the property knows going into it that they should not be designing it where access would come off of that road section. And that has always been a plus so that they're not having to redesign something in the future if it should appear that it was assumed that other businesses were using it and they could too. And the way the stipulation is written, it's cited that if they're going to request an exception, placing a non-access easement was the validation and justification why they shouldn't have to make any improvements on that easement as a part of their project. And then I'll let Ted speak to the design criteria manual.
Ted.
I don't know that the design criteria manual addresses the non-access easement. My understanding is that the non-access easement restricts access to a property for a number of considerations depending on the uses, but I would have to defer to the attorneys as to whether this Hanny's request is valid or not. We looked at this. That was supposed to be I won't say secondary, a basically limited use for delivery vehicles. It has turned into a driveway, Main Street, to access Sam's Club, to access Rushmore Crossing. There are improvements that should be in place for the use of that street, because it is being serving as a street, especially adjacent to this property. There are some improvements that need to be in place for fire protection, for other things. If this development wants to use access to that street, then it should be improved to street standards. Our compromise was and we never knew that they ever wanted to use it, so we were kind of just making sure that it was clear that any future purchasers or developers would know that there was restricted use along that street. Due to Hanny's request, we'll take a look at that, I guess, again, to whether there are reasonable access to that and to the needed improvements to serve that, and would reconsider the non-access easement request as part of that exception. This has kind of changed what we had understood before, and now that they're saying they want to use that, that changes how we'll look at that access easement, that street that serves Rushmore Crossing, and potentially could serve this adjacent development, which is a separate entity, separate property. It would be basically no different than a street going to any other properties right away. So I guess I'd defer to Carla for the non-access easement limitations or requirements.
Carla?
I do think that we have the authority to say where access is going to be provided and to prevent them from using access off of this easement. I haven't looked specifically at this issue, and it looks like we're going to take a look at it in the future, but I feel like this is something that the Planning Commission has the ability to do.
Okay. Any other comments from any of the Planning Commission members? Galen?
Thank you. I guess I want to make sure we're clear on this. We're talking about stipulation 1, and it's just removing the non-access easement, basically the last sentence. Is that what we're talking about here? And is this the last time we'll have an opportunity to review this, or will this come before us at a later time where we can look at it and make a recommendation then?
This is the last time you'll have an opportunity to look at the plat. Any future land use on this property for that area that's within the planned development, you will see again. I would assume that if someone were to purchase this and knowing that they had to go through the planned development property, typically they expand the boundaries to encompass the whole property so that the whole property is reviewed under one review application. And in that regard, you would see it as a final plan development that would be brought back forward to the Planning Commission.
Okay. Anybody else have a comment? John?
PCD?
Just the eastern half of the property is in the plan development.
Can we see the map again? Is it?
So in this particular one, these lines right here designate the planned development boundaries that would be encompassed on the property. Boy, this pen doesn't follow those lines very well. I'm sure that was not user error. And so the western portion would be out. A majority of the portion that is adjacent to the access easement is not in a planned development. Typically, though, when we see something come forward like this and a portion's in, they usually expand the boundaries to include the whole property. Even though there could be more than one commercial use on this lot, one could be just a building permit, one could be with a final plan development. To answer your question, the eastern portion is in, the western portion's out.
How many lots does the existing access drive, or whatever you're gonna call it, how many does that serve right now?
So the access easement is a part of the Rushmore Crossing development. There are numerous lots, as you can see with all the white lines north of it. And when they did bring in that plan development and that plat, just so happens Ted and I were the staff that reviewed that all those years ago, they asked for an exception not to improve that access easement because of the number of lots it's serving, and that would be the semi-route for deliveries. And you'll see if you drive in there that the doors all have the names of the businesses on them. In fact, when I was out taking pictures, there were several semis parked delivering products. So it's functioning as it should. Unfortunately, a lot of us have learned that that's a quick, easy way to get around, and it is being used by customers too. That was not the initial intent of that easement. I can't say to what degree it gets used for delivery versus customer activity, but it does serve numerous lots.
So when it is improved to city standards, who shares the cost of that?
So the only thing that is under review as a part of this plat would be the portion that abuts this lot. I don't think it's anticipated that the development to the south, because remember, the easement was created as a part of Rushmore Crossing to serve Rushmore Crossing. I don't think it was ever anticipated that it would serve the properties to the south, and certainly that's something that the property owners could visit with amongst each other and propose to come to terms with how that would work. But long-term, because of some drainage improvements farther east, there wouldn't be any physical access to anything along a large section of it. We're looking at this property that's at the western end, that potentially as it develops, there might be an access point into it. Hanny, I think it's safe to say that future development would have limited access to the south at best. Please join me.
Sorry. Yeah, there will be no access further east, and I really don't know if there will be access from this property into this access easement as the property develops. But it is going to be in a PCD, so whenever there is any development in that parcel, it will come before you to decide the access. And if there is access, it may be just for delivery route if it does happen. But, why limit it, especially if we have a question about the validity of placing an access easement on this? And currently, by the way, this lot is platted. We're just splitting an existing platted lot into two lots, which is the one before you and then the balance of that Tract C. So currently, the existing platted lot does not have that restriction on it. So by adding this restriction just by splitting the lot, it's another step that really may drive away buyer, or it's another step that may hinder the property as it comes back, because any access there is going to come before you regardless if there is an access easement or no access easement. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions from the, Andy?
My button must not be working today.
Oh, it's 9.
Thank you, Chairperson. So the existing plat that I'm looking at here actually has the access and utility easement as it exists. Is that correct? And what we're adding is a stipulation turning that to a non-access easement? I'm just looking at the attachment on that one right there.
So what they're showing, when you plat, you show all adjacent rights-of-way and easements. They are showing an easement that is located within the Rushmore Crossing development. What Public Works staff is recommending is that a non-access easement designation be placed along that north lot line for this lot that they're creating as it abuts that adjacent access and utility easement. Creating the non-access easement on that north lot line doesn't change the functionality of that easement for Rushmore Crossing.
It just limits the functionality for this particular parcel.
Exactly.
So when I look at this, I mean, It's hard to tell from the aerial if you go down one slide, Vicki. That one right there. You know, you have curb and gutter to the point directly across where you access to Sam's Club. And then it goes to, so would that be considered city street standards to that point?
Not in its entirety. For it to be a commercial street, 26-foot wide pavement, curb and gutter both sides, streetlight conduit, water, sewer, and of course sidewalk.
Looks like the only thing we're missing in that section, though, is sidewalk. I guess what I'm suggesting is as you go into Rushmore Crossing further, and Ross isn't showing up yet, but Boot Barn is, and then the next door, there is no curb line on the service side, and there's not going to be. So, you know, it seems reasonable to me that if you were going to have access to this lot from the north, it would be across from the access road that goes to Sam's Club. And I'm just not quite sure if we already have a lot of that improvement there, why we want to limit this ability to do that when we do have an opportunity through a planned development process to see what they really want. So why limit it now if we have the option to limit it in the future? That's my question.
I think that we anticipate an exception coming in, and as Ted explained in his comments earlier, there are some fire prevention and water improvements that would be needed in this area, and they didn't really want to put it on this developer for that. And with the compromise that they not access this easement, they leave it a part of Rushmore Crossing, that wouldn't be a point of discussion for this application. Certainly if the non-access easement portion of this stipulation is removed and an exception has been submitted to request waiving the improvements along this easement, is that correct, Hanny? Then that will be something Public Works staff would take into consideration. You certainly have the option of eliminating that last sentence from stipulation number 1. That will impact the Public Works review of the exception, and you will see it again as a final plan development.
Anything further? Anybody else have a comment or a question? Okay, I will look for a motion on item number 4.
Second.
Okay, Galen made the motion and Jan seconded that to approve this by, with the change in the stipulations of removing the last sentence on item number 1. Any other comments or questions? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. Before I go to the next item, is somebody back there would like to see if we can fix this so I can see who's speaking, who's...
I'll just raise my hand.
That's what I did.
Well, I know that, but there should be a way to do this, and I push buttons, but nothing seems to work, so.
Madam Chair, I'll be abstaining from item number 6.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. I tried that, and it seemed to work.
There you are.
Thank you. I knew there was a way. Now I'll know when somebody pushes a button. Okay, item number 6.
Item
Yes.
number 6 is a rezone request to rezone property located at South Dakota Highway 44 and Elkville Road from low-density residential district to general commercial district. The staff report is correct, the agenda is correct, except for the final recommendation within the staff report and the recommendation that you see on your online agenda, where inadvertently it says to rezone from high-density residential to public. We apologize for that error. The request before you that staff is recommending to approve is from low-density residential district to general commercial district, and our recommendation is to approve.
Okay. Okay,
With the note changes.
yes. Motion is to approve from low density to general commercial district. All those in favor of that motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Okay, with Andy abstaining from that motion. Okay, we are now at the regular agenda items. First item is number 10, which is a final plan development to expand family services to construct additional parking.
Thank Thank you, Karen. Good morning. Yes, this is a final plan development to allow expansion of the Youth and Family Services headquarters located on North Maple. For property on about approximately 4.93 acres located at the intersection of North Maple and East Adams Street. Let me take you through some slides. Property is now zoned office commercial and planned development. We've gone through rezone on this property for this portions of this property in the recent past. We've been working on the final plan development for a while now. Property as it exists today, to give you an idea of the existing footprint versus the proposed footprint. If you're familiar with the area, this used to be a doctor's office, and this was a food bank, and before that a grocery store. Both properties are vacant now. The applicant is proposing an addition to the existing facility to be located in this area here. And then the old doctor's office would be demolished for parking. Future land use, the property shows employment campus and mixed use commercial. That is urban neighborhood and the vicinity around it. And North Maple Avenue is listed as a collector street on the major street plan. This is a look at the proposed addition. As you can see, the parking is located along the west property line along North Maple Avenue. The applicant submitted a traffic impact study as a part of the review of this request. The impact study noted that there were additional turn lanes that would be needed into and off of the property. So the site plan that you see here shows the turn lanes as they are proposed. There is a sufficient right-of-way to provide those turn lanes. The applicant has agreed to provide those as a part of this plan development. The addition is a two-story addition, as you can see, located along the north side of the property, and the addition of parking as well. Look at the floor plan for the facility. So this orange on the top is the second floor of the facility, which is primarily comprised of classroom space, and then infant and toddler preschool space located on the first floor. This is actually a look at the landscaping on the facility. The applicant has requested one exception to reduce the number of landscaping on the property from 4 to 3. But one of the things I'd like to point out is that while technically this area here would not count as a landscaping island, it does serve as a landscaping island in that it breaks up the pavement, provides an area of green space in the parking lot. Elevations of the building, one of the exceptions that has been requested as a part of this is an increase in the maximum height from 35 feet to 38 feet 1 inch. You'll see that portion of the height is just in that location there for the primary tower or entryway tower. The rest of the facility does meet the 35-foot height requirement. And as you can see, that additional 3 foot 1 inch is mitigated by the scope and scale of the rest of the building. For example, you can see how much it would peak above the rest of the building there. And also here, this is the north elevation where residences on the north side of the alleyway, this is what they would see. So it looks as though they're mitigating the impact of that potential additional height to the greatest extent possible. It does not appear that it should have a negative impact on the neighborhood. I'll look at some of the signage and some of the clients that are being serviced by Youth and Family Services. All the signage does appear to meet the requirements of the sign code. Look at the property with sign posted. For perspective, this is the area that would be the new addition. The interior courtyard here, where you can see the bus parking and the playground area, would all be converted into a playground area to provide additional outdoor space for the children being serviced by the center. This is look at North Maple, looking towards the south. This would be the location of the additional turn lanes that are being proposed by the applicant. And a look at Maple to the north. This is the alleyway on the north side of the property. One of the exceptions that's been requested as a part of this plan development is to waive the requirement for the screening fence. If you recall the north elevation that I showed you, the scope and scale of the building that's proposed would serve as a buffer to the traffic and to the children and the noise that kids can make to the properties to the north, making the addition of the screening fence rather unnecessary. This is a look at Adams Street. This is on the south side of the property. towards the east. And the existing facilities today, and the existing parking today, some of the additional parking on the southeast and east side of the building, as well as some of the green space located in the northeast corner of the building. One thing to note here, if you see that screening fence located along the east property line back here, the screening fence does extend the length of the property and is required as a part of the plan development. That will not be going away. So they do have a screening fence in place along the east side, along those residential uses to the east. Additional shots, this would be where the interior playground would be located at, and the location of the proposed addition. The existing parking, the medical office, or former medical offices, would be redeveloped as parking, as is this, and a final shot looking onto the property. Based on the submitted plans, or the plans submitted by the applicant, they have asked for 3 exceptions. I'll reiterate. The first would be to waive the required screening fence along the north property line. The second would be to increase the maximum building height from 35 feet to 38 feet 1 inch. And the third would be to reduce the required amount of landscape islands from 4 to 3. It appears that based on the design of the facility, they are mitigating the potential impacts of the additional height and the landscaping islands through the design of the property. And the location of the building and the size and scope of the building along the north property line will adequately serve to buffer the use from the neighboring residential uses. We do have some representatives from Youth and Family Services here today to answer any questions that you might have. And with that, staff is recommending to approve the final plan development with the stipulations noted in the staff report.
Move to approve.
Second.
Okay, before we take that motion, we have 2 things. Andy wanted to speak, and then John Roberts wanted to speak. So I'll let John speak first, and then I'll go to Andy.
Thank you. Thank you, Karen. I'm John Roberts, 840 Spruce, Lot 299. I am a city councilman here in Rapid City. First of all, I want to say that I support YFS and I support this expansion. The reason I'm here this morning is there are a few neighbors that contacted me just to the south of this property because of some drainage issues on the property already. And what they're concerned about is with this change, how it's going to affect the drainage on them in the future. I tried to get some pictures linked, but unfortunately I couldn't get them linked. I have one here that I just kind of, if I can pass it out and you can look at it. This is the outfall on the west side where it drains off the property onto Adams Street. When it drains onto Adams in a heavy rain event, the street is flat. It overflows the street into the property owners on the south yards. So what they're concerned about is more drainage coming off the lot, creating more water on their property, possibly, causing damage to their foundations in the future, causing damage to their houses. So I just want to show you this one picture of the outfall so you can have an idea.
Okay.
And if it goes off, just push that bottom button and it'll come back on. So I know going through the staff report, there wasn't any reference to any drainage that was looked at on this. And I understand that they don't have to because in the planned development, because there's no change to the green space that is there, they don't have to. But with an existing condition already on there, I believe that they need to take a look at least how much more drainage is going to be impacted, and also if there's anything that they can do as far as the drainage. On the east side of the lot, there is drainage over there too, but it is, well, it's starting to fill in if you go out and look at it, but it is all just a grass drainage, where the one on the west side is a concrete drainage, just funnels it down and shoots it right across the road in a heavy rain event. So anyway, that's all I have to say. I'm hoping that you'll take a look at this. Thank you.
Okay. Vicki, do you have a comment?
I do, Madam Chair. John, thank you for coming and sharing that with us. It's always good information for all of us to have. I'd like to point out that in one of the advisories, stipulation number 1 states that they will require a building permit as a part of the construction, And with that building permit, a full drainage plan and erosion and sediment control plan will be required and will be reviewed by staff prior to any additional construction of the site. It is good that Mitch is in the audience here today, too. I'm certain that it is his intent and his engineering firm's intent as this goes forward. They will continue to address the drainage. And he would probably like to add something to that, Madam Chair, if that's okay with you.
Sure.
I used it one time before.
I can sure help you. Make sure that cap is gone. I have it on docket. It's saying, please wait. And here we go.
All right.
Good. And then you can just point to it. I'm not sure why they're not.
Knowing this question was going to come up, I went through the steps to put
Before
on
you
this.
start, sir, would you please state your name and then speak into the mic so we get it on record? Thank you.
Mitch Kurtzman, Renner Associates, with the civil designers on this project. Knowing ahead of time that this question was going to be asked, I went through the efforts of delineating how this thing's going to behave. The short answer is what's falling out at the outfall here is going to be reduced by about half, and I'll explain how. What you see there is the area that contributes to this outfall now, the way things are now. It starts, these residential lots up here, go through the property, go down to about in here, cause icing, and then eventually come out here. Proposed design reduces the contributing area to this point by half. And additionally, this area right here will become pervious for the playground area. So the short answer to the question is it's going to be reduced to about half of what's showing up here now.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate that information. Okay, Andy, you had a comment?
I think that was left over, but great project. Used to go to that grocery store with my grandma, and look forward to seeing good things happen there.
Great, thank you. Yes, we do have a motion, and I forgot now who made the motion. You did. Okay, who seconded it? I did. Okay. Steve made the motion, and Linda seconded it. Any other comments? All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Okay, we are at item 11.
Thank you. Item number 11 is 16 PD 045, a final plan development to allow car wash in conjunction with the convenience store with gas sales. The applicant has requested this item be continued to the November 10th, 2016 Planning Commission meeting to allow them to continue to work on signage.
Great.
Move to continue.
Second.
Madam Chair, I'll be abstaining from this item.
Okay. Okay, the motion on the floor is to continue this to the next Planning Commission meeting, which is November 10th. And the motion was made by Steve, seconded by Linda. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And that is with Andy abstaining. Okay, item 12.
Item number 12 is an initial plan development. The applicant has requested that the item be continued to the November 10th Planning Commission meeting.
Move to continue.
Okay, Steve made that motion and Jan seconded to continue this item to November 10th. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries, and we are at item 13.
Item 13 is a preliminary subdivision plan to create 4 lots located south of East Mall Drive, directly west of Cabela's. They are creating 2 industrial lots, 2 general commercial lots. Earlier on your agenda, you continued an initial plan development that would address more site-specific design. And we thought there would be some discussion on that, so I placed the plat on non-consent. There are no issues with this plat. We are recommending to approve it with the stipulations as noted. We are excited to see some development happening just west of Cabela's and look forward to this going forward. Our recommendation is to approve with the stipulations as noted in the staff report.
Okay. We have a speaker request from Hanny on this item. Did you wish to speak, Hanny?
Other than saying I did a great job, you can't say anything.
Good morning, Madam Chair. On this one, we have like a stipulation. It is stipulation 1 again, please. On Dias Avenue, we did submit an exception to improve Dias Avenue. And just to give you a brief history on Dias Avenue, it used to have a bridge across the interstate. And when the state built east-north exit and on and off ramp, they took the bridge and they put a cul-de-sac at the end of Dias Avenue. Moore Drive was built, after that. And currently the city is, after Moore Drive was built, Cabela's was built. There are car dealerships on the west side of Dias. When they platted the car dealerships, they actually went through what we're going through, exceptions and what have you, which is the standard process that city staff have followed. We met with city staff on this one, and they were very accommodating. And we did submit the exception for Dias. Currently, Dias north of Mall Drive is being built into a 3-lane concrete street and is paid for by the city. The properties on the west side, which is basically Rapid Chevrolet on the southwest corner of Dias and Mall Drive, and Nissan on the northwest side, they did plat. One was platted in 2012, and one was platted in 2013, and they went through the exceptions process. The exception was approved with the stipulation that there is a waiver of right to protest future assessment, which we really don't have a problem doing. Unfortunately, timing is really critical on this one, and the reason I'm before you is we got word last night that the city is going to deny the exception for Dias Avenue improvements. So we want to be doing similar to what have been done across the street, which is basically to sign a waiver to protest future assessment on Dias Avenue. And we realize that Dias Avenue, if we do access it, the current Dias Avenue does not have curb and gutter or sidewalk or what have you. There is a waiver of right to protest future assessment on the property that is on this side, so from here to here. Currently, there is approach to the tire shop right in here. We anticipate getting an approach right across the street from it. And if we do get that approach, we will be bringing a petition. We will be basically, as part of this plat, we will be signing a petition to waive our rights to protest any future assessment. But since this will be utilized as access similar to the other side, we do believe that, improvements, at least to that road, to the point where we have access, is needed. And since there is a waiver across the street, we could do an assessment project in which we pay half of those improvements on our side, and they pay half of their improvements on their side. Even though on the north side of Dias currently, which is that side, is currently being paid for by the city without any assessment to any of the businesses that are fronting it. We want to do our share. We don't really want to do everybody's share, but we want to do our share. So we would like to, since we know that the exception is being denied, therefore, we request that that stipulation be modified, that we sign a waiver to protest, waiver of right to protest future assessment on Dias Avenue to any point that we access that Dias Avenue. Thank you.
Okay. Vicki, can you explain about the waiver?
Yeah, Madam Chair, this
that's
really goes to procedure. What's before you today, the authority that the Planning Commission has and the council has in regards to a plat, staff is charged with looking at the street design criteria manual and bringing forward what improvements are outstanding. In lieu of making those improvements, the avenue is to seek an exception. As a condition of the exception, it could be determined that a waiver of right to protest could be signed, and it would delay those improvements until an assessment project came forward. We do not have the authority to say, you don't have to look at these improvements as a part of it. The Street Design Criteria Manual stipulates that these are the improvements that everyone's got to look at. Hanny had some great statements today. The avenue of pursuit on this, though, is to appeal the decision of the exception if he does not agree with it. That appeal will be heard by council, and the discussion that he had would be appropriate before the council. But for what you're looking at today, you're reviewing what outstanding improvements are there and identifying that either they need to be made or an exception needs to be secured. And my suggestion would be letting that stipulation stand as is, staff expediting the review of that exception so that Hanny has time to appeal it in time to get on the very soonest Public Works Committee agenda possible, and he can have that discussion with council.
Okay, thank you. Any comments from the Planning Commission? Andy?
I think the decision would be easier if we knew what was going to be built there. The reality is Dias, as it goes, you get to the end of the cul-de-sac there, it gets very steep and probably doesn't provide very good access to that lot. If you were to look at that, there's kind of a whole drop off there. So to me, it makes sense, because why improve something that's not going to be utilized? But if there is a portion that needs to be utilized, then I understand how that needs to be improved. So to me, it's kind of hard to make that decision until we really know what the situation is and how it affects the master development plan. That would be my comment.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments from the Planning Commission? John?
It seems to me in the past, the Planning Commission has been able to change or take away stipulations that they're not in favor of before passing it on to City Council. But what you're saying is that even if we don't agree with what you're doing, we shouldn't comment on it.
Go ahead, Vicki.
No, I encourage your comments, and I think that Mr. Shaffey needs to hear your comments. But the procedure is that if you do not want to make a street improvement as required by ordinance, then you have to seek it through an exception. The exception is reviewed administratively, and if they do not agree with the decision of the staff, that decision is then appealable to council. This is different than, let's say, a plan development or a conditional use permit where you might have a stipulation that talks about should screening be required or not. Those Planning Commission can waive. It would be the same as saying we're going to, through a plan development, support reducing parking from 25 spaces to 20. You could have the authority to do that. You would not have the authority to say this developer does not have to review parking for this property. We're going to remove that. You don't have that authority. You can't remove the procedure, you can't remove the requirement, but you can grant, through a plan development, an exception. In this case, the procedure for a plat, exceptions are granted when they're not in agreement with staff by council, not the Planning Commission. And this is different than when you served on Planning Commission before, John. At that time, all exceptions to plats were known as variances to subdivision regulations, required notification and letters, etc. They came before the Planning Commission and the council. That procedure was since revised. Most variance exceptions are administratively approved, and then it's fast. It doesn't require letters. It expedites the procedure. On those that are in conflict with what the developer would like, council makes that decision. So in this case, my point being, the stipulation as stands gives him the avenue for that discussion, but that discussion needs to be with council through the appeal of the exception. I don't know that staff has made the final decision on the exception. I've not seen that document, but certainly once it is finalized, the owners will be made aware of it, and then they can appeal that to council.
Next question, who is paying for the development across the interstate adjacent to the car stores? Are they being assessed for that?
Ted?
I'm not sure what you're talking across the interstate.
Well, Dias is being improved.
It's all north of the interstate. There's no Dias improvement south of the interstate. If you mean across Mall Drive,
Yeah.
for that, I can't answer that question. I don't know exactly how that's funded. That would be for the design group. I know there was a warp signed for the car lots and that, well, not necessarily the car lots, but that property to the west that Hanny referred to. I don't know how the funding is broken down on that. We could find that out, but I don't have that information.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions or comments from this Planning Commission? I'll look for a motion on item 13. Thank you, Kim. Do I have a second? Okay. Kim made the motion and Galen seconded it. And Galen, you wanted to speak?
Yeah. Would it ease the process to, is it possible to send this without a recommendation, or do we have to say yay or nay? You know, just, it sounds like it's going to go in front of city council either way, so what's the easiest way to just pass it off without having to make him appeal?
I think they are in a hurry to proceed. I think sending it forward today, allowing the procedure to follow course, that we don't have the authority here in this room to waive the procedural standards, that will still bring this item before the city council at their next meeting. The stipulation standing as it is, they can differ from what you're recommending, but they too will be considering that exception. So at that time, the issue in and of itself may go away if the exception is granted, and then the improvement, it would not be needed at that time. My recommendation again is to send it forward as worded, allow staff to expedite the review of the exception, and allow the owner to appeal that if necessary, and have that conversation before the council.
Okay. Steve?
So really, basically, we don't have any option. Just approve it and push it through. Otherwise, Hanny's not going to get to where he needs to be. So what you're saying is the only way that we can ensure the process works is to go ahead and approve this. Is that what I'm hearing?
I believe that would be a correct assessment, Steve. Thank you.
Okay. Any other comments from the Planning Commission? Okay, all those in favor of the motion as it is, say aye.
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 Those opposed? Motion passes, and that will go forward. We are now at item 14.
Thank you. Item 14 is 16 PD 048. It's an initial plan development to allow a warehousing of less than 5,000 square feet.
Rob, is your mic not working?
We can't hear.
How's that?
That's better, thank you.
16 PD 048, it is initial plan development to allow warehousing less than 5,000 square feet, located on 1.79 acres northeast of the intersection of Marlin Drive and Creek Drive. Take you through some slides. Property is currently zoned general commercial district. It is located within a plan development designation. Property in the vicinity is zoned a mix of commercial, light industrial, and some heavy industrial to the southwest. There's no structural development on the property today. However, if you're familiar with the area, we've got Kilowatt Electric headquarters going into the north, and we've got some additional development to the southwest of the intersection as well. So we do have some expanding services going on. in this area. And Marlin Drive has been completed through to the north and east as well. Area is suitable for light industrial development, and Elkvale Road is entrance corridor of the city's comprehensive plan, also noted as a principal arterial street on the city's major street plan. So this area has good connectivity to the regional transportation network. This is a conceptual site plan of what the applicant is proposing to do. It's actually comprised of 10 commercial lots. There was a plat associated with this. So they're proposing to provide 10 commercial lots, each with an individual warehouse, each less than 5,000 square foot in size, which would be used for for property owners, used for personal business. So if they're a business owner, kept stock, needed a place to keep their stock or whatever it was, this would provide those property owners with a location to do that. As a part of this initial plan development, the applicant has requested one exception to allow for an alternative landscaping design. As you can see there, what they're proposing to do is provide for a landscaping buffer to be located around the perimeter of the campus of the entire project. Each of those warehouses, however, would be on an individual lot. As a part of the review of this, staff noted that while we don't have any issues with the conceptual idea of this, we don't know if it meets landscaping requirements or not. It's possible that it could, and there would not be a need for them to seek an exception. We also don't know the species of the plantings that are being proposed, and as such, we don't know that this is an appropriate buffer as they're intending it to be. As a part of the final plan development that would be required prior to getting a building permit, they would need to provide some additional additional information regarding the landscaping. Look at the elevations for the proposed buildings. As you can see, a fairly simple design, overhead door with person access. That's the side. Here's a look at the property. As I noted before, there's a lot of construction going on right now. While there is a lot of dirt on the property and dirt moving in the area, it's all part of ongoing construction on neighboring properties. This is a look at Marlin Drive looking to the east and to the west, and a look at Creek Drive looking to the north along the western edge of the property boundaries, and another look onto the site. As a initial plan development, as I noted before, a final plan development will be required to be submitted prior to issuance of a building permit, where we expect many of the issues regarding landscaping, parking, and setback lot design will be addressed at that time in association with the plat, which is also moving through the process. But conceptually, right now, today, it appears that the proposed warehousing development will work, and staff is recommending that the application be approved with the stipulations noted in the staff report.
Okay, thank you. Any comments from the Planning Commission? John?
I have a question. Are these going to be individually owned properties, so it'll be condominiumized in a PCD, or what will we call it?
So they're going to be individual lots, and they will come, the new owners will come in and individually buy the lot. It is in a planned development, so you will see it as a part of a final. It won't be condoed where they just, they buy a portion of one larger lot. They will own the individual lots. Because they're providing service through an access easement, they will secure that out with a joint maintenance agreement so that the city's not responsible for maintaining an easement. Does that answer your question, John?
Yep.
Madam Chair, if I might.
Yes.
This is a very innovative layout. It's not one we've seen before in Rapid City, and we were excited when it came in. I think that KTM did an excellent job when they presented it to staff, showing us some of the history where this particular developer has successfully built this in other communities similar to ours. And we're kind of excited to see how this plays out, but we will be bringing forward a final plan development, and we will be putting it upon you to consider several exceptions as a part of that to see whether or not this specific condensed design works in our community. But we're excited to give it a try.
Okay, thank you. I thought the same thing. You don't normally see small little warehouse lots like that. So any other comments from the Planning Commission? I'll entertain a motion.
Move to approve.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Oh. Okay, sorry, I didn't see your light up there, so, okay. So, okay, we'll have Kim making that motion and Jan seconding it to approve this item. Any other comments? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes, and we are on item 15.
Item 15 is a major amendment to a plan development to expand Carpenter Dental, which is located at 5610 Bent Drive. Property is zoned office commercial district in the plan development. They're requesting two exceptions. One is to reduce the rear yard setback from 25 feet to 10 feet, and an exception to waive the screening requirement along the east lot line and the south lot line. Here and here. Here's looking at the existing dental clinic. They're proposing a 2,820 square foot addition on the north side of the building. So the request for the rear yard setback is basically in that northeast corner. There'll be additional parking constructed on the south end of the property. Future land use shows it as employment center with mixed-use commercial to the north, and then we have townhomes and single-family along the west property line, the east and the south. As you can see, it's in this area where Sheridan Lake Road is a collector and Catron Boulevard, and it sort of serves as that buffer between the more commercial uses in the corner of the intersection and more residential to the south. Here we have the site plan showing in the shaded area the proposed addition to the building and to the parking lot. Elevation, it looks like there's a second story up here, but it meets the height requirement for the district. And the landscape plan, their landscaping is in compliance with previous plan developments and the proposed construction. Here we have a shot looking at the property. As you can see to the east and to the south, we've got this change in elevation. It really rises. This is looking north along Bent Drive and to the south. And again, you can see the rise in elevation south and east of the property. Townhomes located on the west side of Bent Drive. Signpost on the property, and again, you can see how the properties to the south and the east rise, and the homes which are built much higher to the south and to the east. For this reason, staff is recommending that the exception to waive the screening requirement be approved, because putting a fence up doesn't serve any purpose. They're going to be able to look right over the fence. They're higher than the fence. So they'd have to build a pretty high fence in order to provide the screening. This is looking from the south end of the property to the north and east. Again, you can see the change in elevation. This is to the northeast where the addition is proposed. This is looking to the east. You can see in the distance the structure. These are pretty long residential lots to the east. If I go back to the site plan or the vicinity map, you can see that all the houses to the north and east are accessed along this Harper Court. And the houses are built along Harper Court. For this reason, staff's recommending that the exception to reduce the rear yard setback from 25 feet to 14 feet, as it were, be approved, because there is the change in elevation and the distance to the adjacent properties is so great that that's what serves as the buffer. Whereas the 25-foot setback wouldn't really provide that buffer. In addition, previous plan developments have also approved a reduction in setback along that east property line. Staff's recommending that the major amendment be approved with the stipulations noted in the staff report. Are there any questions for staff?
Any comments or questions from the Planning Commission?
Move to approve.
Okay, Linda made a motion to approve the item. Do I have a second? Seconded by Galen. Any comments from the Planning Commission on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion passes, and we are on item 16.
Thank you. Item 16 is 16 PD 050, final plan development to allow an automobile repair shop on approximately 1.62 acres of property located southwest of the intersection of Eglin Street and Dias. This is on the south side of Interstate 90. Black Hills Automotive Technicians is proposing to relocate their facilities from their location on Dias Avenue to this location in a new 6,480 square foot building comprised of shop, storage, and office space. The property is zoned general commercial district, located in an area with a mix of commercial and light industrial development. No structural development on the property as it exists today. The area is deemed appropriate for light industrial development, given the unique operation of the facility. The applicant has, I should note, requested an exception to reduce their amount of parking on the site from 56 spaces to 38 spaces. Again, it fits in with the light industrial nature of the use. While an automobile repair shop is a permitted use in the general commercial district, it really does fit in with the light industrial nature of the area. And Eglin Street is known, or is seen as a arterial street on the city's major street plan. Here's a look at what they're proposing to build. Just a quick explanation of what they're proposing. Based on the unique operation of the facility, they believe, and they've shown through some of their parking counts, that they would only need a maximum of 38 parking spaces to service the facility. Part of the reason why is because they're providing upwards of 20 spaces within the building to allow for the repair of vehicles, the servicing of vehicles. So they are providing sufficient or some additional parking on site. What this site plan is showing you today, though, is that in the future, based on a use that wasn't quite so unique in nature, additional parking could be provided on the site if it needed to be. So while they're asking today is that reduction in parking from 56 to 38, they are noting it's because of the unique operation of their facility, whereas another facility could provide the parking that was necessary. Here's a landscaping plan showing the proposed landscaping facility. View of the property with the sign posted. I'll look at Eglin Street to the east and Eglin Street to the west and across the street. Another view onto the property itself as well. No structural development there today, but they are, as you can see, eager to get going. As I noted before, based on the unique operation of the facility, it appears that 38 parking spaces will be sufficient for them to meet their parking needs. All other land area regulations are being met as a part of this final plan development, and staff is recommending to approve the request with the stipulations noted in the staff report.
Okay, any questions or comments from the Planning Commission?
Move to approve.
Second.
Okay, Steve made a motion to approve and Linda seconded it. I have just one quick question. You mentioned, Rob, that if there's additional places for parking, if somebody else took over, it's not the same. If somebody took over as a auto repair shop, they wouldn't have to provide additional parking.
No,
but if
this exception in this final plan development is specific to the operations plan that was submitted as a part of this request. So if a new use were to come in, as with any new use, they would be required to obtain a building permit for the change in use, right. And they would be required at a minimum to show that they're meeting the required parking for their use.
Gotcha.
If they wanted to also receive a reduction in parking, that would require an amendment to the plan development.
Gotcha. Thank you. I appreciate that clarification. Okay. Any other comments or questions on the motion? All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion passes. Item 17.
Item 17 is a final plan development to allow an oversized garage. Property is located at 4849 Enchanted Pines Road. It's currently zoned General Agriculture District. The one exception being requested is to reduce the minimum required lot size in the General Agriculture District for a single-family dwelling from 20 acres to 10 acres. Property is 10 acres in size. Currently, there's a single-family dwelling located on the property. They're asking for conditional use permit to allow an oversized garage, constructing a 40-foot by 40-foot detached garage, which exceeds the maximum allowed 1,500 square feet of garage space because there is an attached garage and shed located on the property. For this reason, the fact that there's a single-family dwelling located on the property, staff's recommending that the exception to reduce the minimum required lot size to 10 acres be approved. Here we have an elevation showing, or sorry, a vicinity map showing the location of the existing dwelling on the property. Future land use shows property suitable for low-density neighborhood, and it's located just east of Highway 16 and the water tower up there. Here's the site plan showing the location of the proposed 40-foot by 40-foot shed. I'll show you with some of the pictures what it looks like there. Elevation of the proposed shed. And this is looking from Enchanted Pines onto the access easement. As you can notice, you don't see the house because the elevation drops once you get onto that access road. But the sign is posted so that the neighbors could see, and we did get some calls, and everyone's in favor of the proposed garage. They're just happy it's not apartment buildings. This is looking along Enchanted Pines to the east and west, and turkeys in the area. And here we're down the access drive looking at the dwelling and the horseshoe shape of the driveway. I believe this pad is where the proposed 40-foot by 40-foot shed is going to be located. Looking at the existing attached garage and shed, and you can notice on the left-hand side of the picture the steep topography. Really, that provides the buffer needed, so the applicant isn't proposing any additional landscaping or fencing because it isn't needed. Looking east or north at the heavily wooded and how it drops down into a valley, and it's 10 acres, so it rises up on that other side too. With that, staff's recommending that the final plan development to allow an oversized garage be approved with the stipulations noted in the staff report.
Okay.
Approve. Move to approve.
Okay. Linda made a motion to approve. Seconded by Galen. Any comments from the Planning Commission? All those in favor of that motion with those stipulations, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. We're at discussion items. Do we have any discussion items? No? Okay. Then item 19 is election of officers. So we have 3 positions: president, vice or chairman, vice chairman, and secretary. So I'll take I'll take.
Nominate Eric Braun.
Okay. Have a motion. Pardon? You seconded that?
Yep.
Thank you. I have a motion to approve Eric as chairman from Jan and seconded by Steve. Any questions, comments? All those in favor of that motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, Eric can continue. Yay. That happens when you're not here. Okay, office of vice chairman is now open.
Nominate Karen for vice chairman.
Second.
Okay. Linda made a motion to nominate Karen. Seems odd to say that. And Steve seconded it. Any other nominations? Okay, all those in favor of that motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, that motion passes. Now open for secretary. And Steve is currently the secretary, right? Thank you, Jan.
I'll second it.
All right, and Linda seconded it. Any other nominations, questions? Okay, all those in favor of having Steve be the secretary, continue to do that. say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Good job. That wasn't very long. Okay, any planning commission items from planning commissioners? Okay, I guess that's it, unless there's anything else. Oh, you have a, I'm sorry. Go, Darla.
I'd like to just talk a little bit about the short-term rentals and what happened with the city council. And now it's been popped back into your court, so maybe I could just go through a little bit of that with you. I promise not to take too much time. But the upshot on this is that we kind of disagreed on how we wanted this to be enforced. We want the code enforcement to act on short-term rentals that are acting in violation of the codes. And as Vicki explained to me, that the city can only control the outside, like the parking, the sound buffering, distance from neighbors, and the only exception is with covenants. So when you're looking at this again, and we would like you to, probably have some kind of a time for code enforcement, like if you're supposed to stop operating within 2 weeks, you need to stop operating within 2 weeks, because we know that the group that, or the home that we asked to stop operating because of parking violations and neighbor complaints did not stop. So we might want to see something like that. Some of the council people thought the fees were too high. So maybe have a look at that again. I don't know what they're thinking. I know it's $250. What do they want, $150? I'm not sure. What's that? Go ahead.
Madam Chair?
Yes, go ahead.
So as we noted, and I know it's confusing because it says we're going to collect a fee, but there's a fee resolution that the council adopted where all charges for all applications are considered separate from the procedure that's created for the application. So council will hear that. We'll have to bring forward justification, how many staff hours it takes and whatnot. We really don't know what that number is going to be until we secure the procedure. And just kind of an FYI, we did have a wonderful internal meeting because we had council coming at us, some wanting more, some wanting less. Karen, I believe you were in the audience that night. And we will be bringing forward a revised ordinance amendment, trying to find some middle ground for everyone. And we encourage the Planning Commission to look at it, vet it like you did the first go-around. You folks did such a wonderful time discussing it. And then we'll bring that back to council and see where it goes at council. But wonderful discussion all the way around. It appeared that there were some who hadn't read the ordinance, and there were some assumptions. We tried our best to explain that at council. At the end of the day, we are certainly here to create an easier process for those who are truly functioning as an Airbnb while still preserving the integrity of the neighborhood. And I think we're getting close. And Darla, thank you for sharing what happened at council. I think it's good for Planning Commission as a whole to hear.
Yeah, it's an awareness problem. Most people go online, they go to Airbnb, and they think that they've hit all the regulations there, and then they don't think past that to the city. The complaints I got were really wonderful. You've got to just hear this. They didn't want city interference in their business. They didn't see any need for a permit. And one gentleman did not want to pay state sales tax and thought we should just stay out of that. And I said, look, I'm doing you a favor right now. Pay your state sales tax. We've got nothing to do with that, and it's going to hit you sooner or later. Just so go get a license and pay your sales tax. So anyway, just some misinformation that's been floating around, and Vicki's been working on this, and I'm sure that we'll get it resolved. And the mayor wanted us to work on this, but he's more concerned about the long-term rentals. But I think as we go into the future, this is going to be more of a problem, so let's kind of try and get ahead of it. I see no problem with trying to work on it now instead of when it really becomes a bigger issue. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Darla. And I was in the audience, and it was quite a lively discussion at City Council. But I agree, there is a problem with long-term rentals, but this is something that's going on now, and it's going to keep going on. More and more people are going to be doing this, and across the nation you can see other communities doing this.
And I'm in favor of it. I love the idea of shared resources and Uber and Airbnb. I think it's great for the economy, but we have to have some regulations.
Gotcha.
So.
Thank you, and thanks, Vicki. We'll be looking forward to hearing that, I'm sure. Any other questions or comments from the Planning Commission? Okay. Thank you. Do I have a second? What?
The thing
Okay.
is you've got to be
We're
very
adjourned.
careful with health standards too. And that's, you know, and I'm sorry, having worked for the Department of Health and knowing what illnesses can happen.